Welcome to the She Wins podcast. I'm your host, Heather Sumlin, and today I'm interviewing Elaine Welbourn. Elaine is a world team member for dog agility in Canada, and she is a agility coach. She's also a photographer and has been since she was a teenager. So I'm really excited to pick her brain and learn a little bit more about who she is, where she came from, and what life has thrown at her. Okay. Well, Elaine, I'm so glad to have you on the show today. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. Appreciate you taking the time.
What I want you to do first is just kind of do a quick introduction and tell us a little bit about who you are.
Thank you. Well, I'm Elaine. I live in Ontario, Canada, in a super beautiful part of the province. We do a lot of hiking. There's a lot of beaches here. I say I moved for the beaches, but we're also in the snow belt, so we get all four seasons, and I certainly have a lot of fun with that. My dogs. Speaking of which, I have four dogs. Soon to be five. I'm actually waiting on a puppy coming to me in August, so that's super exciting. I live with a really fantastic fiance who puts up with all of these dogs and all of these outdoor excursions, so I'm very lucky in that way as well. And we spend most of our time just enjoying each other's company and training my dogs. It's a pretty good life, and honestly, the life that I've always wanted.
So tell me, how did you get started in agility in the first place?
Thank you. So I actually started with my mom. So when I was a little kid and all the kids in the neighborhood would be at soccer practice or ballet or piano, I didn't want to do any of those things. I was always sitting on the sidelines watching my mom do dog training classes. And I'd sit there and I'd like feed Goldfish crackers to the dog sitting beside me while she was working with the instructor. And one thing kind of led to another. And eventually I was old enough to start participating in those classes. And then we kind of had a role reversal where she was now feeding the dog, watching me, and eventually just bringing me to dog training classes. So really, it's because of her that I have a lot of the interests that I have today. Now, I did take a bit of a hiatus, kind of an interesting story. When I was about maybe 14, 15, I was going off to high school. And I was given the choice of two electives, two classes that I could take. And option A was a co-ed fitness class with a bunch of sweaty, gross boys. And option B was a digital photography class, just an introduction to the art. So it was a pretty obvious choice, as I think it would be for most young women. And I went with photography. And that's what kind of launched my career, but also ended my career in dog training, right? I found that I was spending a lot of my time working with the instructor, doing a lot of one-on-one, building up what became a successful business for me and is still the business I have today. And I always say that I'm pretty grateful for the couple that took a chance on the acne-covered teenager who couldn't drive, because that was my first wedding. And I'm now 450 weddings in. So
Acne-covered teenager doing her first wedding. So how old were you?
maybe 16. I mean, I started with photographing families and people's pets in the neighborhood and nature and kind of just getting the camera in my hands whenever I could. And then from there, in my photography teacher just took a shine to working with me, spent so many hours outside of what his paid job required him to do. And I actually remember one day we were working late after class and he was just helping me with some projects. And I actually missed the bus because we were just spending this time together, going through some editing and just working with my photos. So he was that kind of a mentor to me and someone I actually still am in touch with today. So it's because of him. He said, well, why don't you try doing a wedding? Why don't you give it a go and see if you like that genre? And I did, and I did. So that's where we are today.
I love this whole story because my daughter started doing photography her senior year of high school. And it is what she wants to do with her future. And she started a little business, and it's been a lot of fun to watch just kind of the flourishing that happens when you follow your passion. Now, how did you get back into dog sports then? So you start this wedding photography business. Obviously, you've been successful if you've gotten 450 people to say, yes, you can photograph my most important day.
Fortunately, I can drive now, so that makes it a little easier.
I would hope you finally got the license, yes. So how'd you get back into dog sports?
So I built this business and eventually ended up moving to Aurelia very shortly after my mom died. So the big part of my story is that my life kind of has two sections. We have before her and then after her, and it's one of those things that so a lot of my story, at least as it revolves around dogs, is because of my mom. Right? We started doing this together, and it was something that she built as a passion in me. And in 2015, she died on the operating table during open heart surgery. She was in her early 50s. I was 21. So I was at a point in my life where things were just starting to come together. I had the photography business. I was halfway through university. I had my own car. I had a lot of friends. I was on a scholarship. Life was where I wanted it to be. And compared to the friends that I spent time with back then, I felt like I was ahead.
Hmm.
Like that, I was years before where I had anticipated being at that time, and then it crashed. Right? It's being an only child
Mm.
that has given me the relationship with my mom that was more than just a parent. She was my best friend. She was my go everywhere, do everything kind of girl. My call when I needed some business advice. She was an entrepreneur herself, and actually so was my father. So it was quite natural that I followed that route. And whenever I'd be stuck with a client and just not know what to say in an email, or if I needed some help with scheduling, or that first person to drive me to the weddings back then, it was always them, and especially her. And after she died, I just had nothing left. It felt like all the air had been sucked out of me.
Hmm.
And so I finished university, and I remember sitting in the living room with my father, and us both just kind of looking at each other saying, well, what do you want to do? Like there was just nothing left. And I said, well, I'd kind of like to go back to Aurelia. That's the town that I was at university in, because that's where I felt I had the most family at that point. So we drove up there, and I said, Dad, I think I'd like to live here. That would be pretty cool. So we kind of start driving around the neighborhoods, and don't we see a sign for a development, new housing complex in a really pretty part of town where there's lots of hiking and lots of forests. I said, why don't we stop in here? Let's just look at the model home. Let's just have some fun. Well, within 24 hours of having made the decision to go for this drive, I bought a house. And it was my mom's life insurance policy that gave me that opportunity, and my dad allowing me to have it. So to say that I won the birth lottery is the understatement of the century. So fast forward, and my house is built, and I'm sitting on the living room with no furniture, no window coverings, and the smell of construction just potent in the air, that. And I'm looking around, and I'm just lost. I have what I wanted, but it wasn't the picture that I saw for myself. So I get in my car, and I do what I do when I need to clear my head. I start going for a drive. And lo and behold, I get like 5 doors down. And don't I see a man walking a little dog? And the little dog reminded me of like a lassie puppy, like a
Hmm.
rough collie puppy. And I'd had collies growing up as a kid. My first agility dog was a collie. My mom says that collie helped to raise me. So I had this history, all kind of flooding back at once. So I stop the car, and I run over like a crazy person, right? And I say, hey, 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 can I pet your puppy? I'd love to see your puppy. I'm having a really bad day, and it would mean a lot to me. He says, well, you can, but it's not a puppy. This is actually a Shetland sheepdog. And I've just cut his hair because it's summer, and I felt like he was going to be too hot.
Hmm.
So I start petting this dog, and I kind of meet eyes, and they see right through you, you know? So I get in the car, and I turn around, and I go back home. I'm sitting on the floor in the living room with no furniture and my laptop pulled up, and I start Googling breeders of Shetland sheepdogs. Well, the first breeder I call, doesn't she have a 10-week-old male puppy who is ready to go like that week? So that was Ryder. And it's because of Ryder that I got back into dog sports. And I like to say that he kind of saved me in a way. He pulled me out of a really dark place and put me on the path that I probably should have stayed on the entire time. So I like to think she kind of worked through him a little bit to
Hmm.
do that.
Would you?
So anyway, sorry, go ahead.
So would you say that that's a defining moment in your life to an extent?
You know what? I think that I like that one better than the defining moment being when she died. Right?
Hmm.
It's easy to focus on the negatives, and it's easy to take those experiences and use them as a platform to transform, but that's not where the actual transformation's happening.
Right.
It's when you find it within yourself. So for me, part of that was what I named him. So there's two names that we give our dogs when they're registered with the Kennel Club. One is the name we call them every day.
Mm-hmm.
So I called him Ryder, which means dark night, like the night that saves you from the palace, the
Yes.
guards, it's that kind of night. But then the second name is a registration name that goes on their official paperwork. And I called him Life Turns Corners. And Life Turns Corners is my mom's favorite phrase. It's on all of my jackets as a world team member now, and it goes with me through life. I think that getting him was my turning of a corner, and also the sport has a lot of corners that you turn. It's a very nitty gritty sport where you're getting into tight to spots and then running out to another spot and getting in tight there again. So in a lot of ways, I think that helped me to let go of some of what I was experiencing at that point.
So when your mom would use this term, this life turns corners, what would she refer to when she would talk about that phrase?
She used it a lot when I was growing up, and I'd run into a bully at school, for example. I mostly had friends, but if I had a tough day, right, she would say, you know what, life turns corners, and I think she meant that we have the power to find a new direction and to explore that, and that it's okay for that to happen. That's part of life. We don't have to stay on this continuum that just goes through in a straight line. Life is not linear. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's something that we can all learn from.
I really like that too because when you think about it, the longer you live, the more corners you're gonna turn. Your corners will also be rounded a little bit too. I feel like, but you're gonna have these hills and valleys and ups and downs and turns, and I think that's really beautiful. That
Well,
is
thank you.
something.
I tend to agree. It's one of those things that I think it's important for us to recognize that even if we come back to where we started, there may be a reason for that.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's a reason we thought of at the time, and it's a path that we tried to get ourselves onto. But maybe it's a reason that came into our lives. And what can we learn from that or turn away from that? So I think life ebbs and flows, and we've got to just ride the wave.
So tell me a little bit about your photography and or dog agility. Either way, what have those journeys taught you?
I live two lives, right? By day, I'm a professional dog trainer, and I have an incredible group of students that I feel inspire me a lot more than I inspire them. And in my other life on weekends, if I'm not competing, I work as a wedding photographer, and I'm surrounded by cultures and by beauty that I would never be exposed to otherwise. To see how different people experience and celebrate love is something we have in Canada that they don't have in other parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where else in a single weekend can I go to a wedding on a farm and then go to a temple and celebrate some Jewish culture, and then the next day, be in the middle of a Chinese tea ceremony?
Mm-hmm.
Where can I experience that but here? And I think that's a really important part of my growth as a human, and as what I can bring to my photography as well, just pulling from all these different experiences that I have, and how they have shaped me.
If has there ever been a time? I mean, I always ask the same question. How do you define winning? My podcast is called She Wins. We talk about winning, but everyone defines it differently. So, how would you define it?
It's changed over the years, right? There was a day that it was about how many podiums I stood on.
Mm-hmm.
There was a day it was about how many clients I booked. There was a day about how much money was left in my bank account. And having had good moments of all of those, and having had a lot of learning through all of those, I think today my version of winning is for me. It's the day that I feel the most free. That I feel I can look back tomorrow and say, yes, I grew. Now, if you ask me that tomorrow, maybe I'll have a new definition, and that's part of life turning corners.
I, I'm curious about because obviously there's been times when you've made the podium, made these big teams, you've done a lot in your sport. Was there ever a time when you didn't win, but you learned more?
Yes, and that's actually what led us here today, and what led me to work with Barbara. But a few years ago, must have been 2021 or 2022, I took a trip out to New Brunswick. So for those who don't know that distance, we're talking about a major road trip, like 13, 14 hours. And I had driven all the way down there, and I carted with me one of my friends from university who knew nothing about dogs. God bless her soul for coming with me. And I was in the best possible position to win this national championship. So through the year, we have the opportunity to accumulate buys, and the buys advance us faster through the preliminary rounds. You can go in without buys and kind of start from the ground, but I wanted to go in as far ahead as I possibly could. So I went in with all these buys and with this friend that was all excited to watch and see what I do and what it's all about. And we had this big trip all planned out. And I went to the line for the first run, 13 runs in total. It was the first run. And I set my dog up and I was feeling confident. And I walked out and I looked back and he was standing there and he was ready to go. And I hear them say the word go. And go means you're on the course. Off you go. So I released the dog. But the problem was there was multiple rings happening at the same time. So we had other teams working, doing agility in other sections of the room. And I had heard the go from somebody else.
Oh.
So my judge was not ready, and my timing people were not ready, and my dog was on the course. So this is an automatic elimination in the sport. You're just out for that round. And when I came off the field, I had my friend there who knew nothing about dogs telling me that it was the most amazing thing she'd ever seen. And I walked to the corner and I sat down and I just completely lost control of my emotions in those moments. I remember putting my head on my hands and just crying for half an hour. I wanted to go home. I was just done. And what I should have done in that moment, in retrospect, is looked at her face. She was so excited, and my dog was so excited. But I felt that I had let down my team, and I had felt I had let down myself. So that set the tone for the entire weekend. And out of 13 rounds, we were eliminated from 12 of them, all for different silly little mistakes that at the level that I was competing at aren't common for me to have been making. And I went home on this road trip feeling that I had wasted this amazing opportunity and the work that I'd put in to get in the position that I had been going in. But it's because of that journey that I found Barbara and yourself, Heather, and the mental management solutions to help me with that. So being a very science-minded person, very analytical, I like having a step-by-step formula. I like it for my business. I like it for my dog training and my coaching. So I set out to find a system that would resemble that for the struggles that I was having. And I found it. So without that weekend, I wouldn't be the handler that I am today. I wouldn't be as mentally strong and as prepared as I am today to deal with that same circumstance if it came up again.
So what was the main thing when you look back on the mental management training that you did? What's the big takeaway that you received from the training that helped transform your game?
There's many, but the one that comes to mind is that I'm not alone in this. It was quite groundbreaking for me to realize that this is common enough. The struggles that I was facing are not unique to me, that there's people out there that are having those struggles as well and have found a way to work through them. So I can too. Having something that resembled a community made me feel just not alone in that moment.
I think that's why. So Barbara Courier is who you're talking about. She's a mental management certified coach. Tia Anders is a mental management certified coach. And we came together and we decided, you know what, we're going to build a community of handlers, and we're doing a Patreon channel just for handlers who are interested in the mental game. And it's been really fun. It's been fun for us because we get to see each other once a week and record content and talk and network and have this fun experience. But it's also really good for the handlers to be able to be reminded of that exact thing. You're not the only one who may need, mental management works for everything. You can use it for your photography business. You can use it for dog agility. You can use it for anything, relationships. And so it's really fun for us to be able to provide those opportunities. So I'm just grateful that you found it, and then you brought Barbara to Canada to do a seminar. So what was that experience like?
My students are the best part of my week, every week. And I hope they know that. I never think that they do enough. But when I found Barbara and when what she taught me transcended changing my game and became changing my outlook on any situation that I was facing a struggle in, I thought, what better opportunity than to share it with these people that I feel give much more to me than I give to them. So I remember being at the seminar with Barbara, and we were in the bathroom, and she was washing her hands, and I said, I'd really like to come back and do this again, and I'll tell my Canadian friends to come with me, or you could just come to us.
Uh-huh.
And in that moment, the idea was just born, standing right there. And I brought her up, and I cried through most of that seminar, to be quite honest. And it was just watching my students have those same moments that I felt the first time that I learned about the system and started applying it myself, and could see the change in myself within hours, really, certainly within the weekend. To see that from an outside perspective was just very powerful for me.
What do you think the biggest challenge is for handlers, and why is mental management so special and important for just even your students?
I think we get very wrapped up in this being a serious sport. We put a lot of ourselves into it. I've had a number of injuries because of this sport. I've had a number of family events that I've missed being away competing. I've had a lot of time that I've been reflecting on just who I am as a person, and agility has been so connected to that. And sometimes that's a good thing, but sometimes we can get a little bit too serious. There's a trainer here that says, sometimes we have to care a little bit less. And I think what she means by that is that we get all wrapped up in the seriousness of it, and we forget that at the end of the day, these are dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Dogs are jumping over sticks, and they're doing it because they love it, and because they love their human, and because they get a toy and a food reward, and it's fun for them. And we get wrapped up in the seriousness too much, and that starts to affect our teammates. And I think that it's important that we put that into perspective. And without the mental management system to reground us in those moments, we can end up spiraling, and it'll affect our game, it'll affect our performance, but most importantly, it's going to affect our relationship with those teammates.
What amazes me about dog sports, because I own dogs, but I don't run dogs. So I look at it from an outside looking in. So I'm not a competitor, I'm a mental coach. But what has always struck me about handlers is that they naturally do a really good job of making their teammate balanced. They get their thoughts focused before they run. They trust their training during the run for their dog. And then afterwards, they reward their dog and they build them up and they build their self-image, which are the circles in which we talk about mental management, the conscious, subconscious self-image. And they do a really good job of helping their dog be balanced. And all we're asking is to do the same.
To that, when I think about my students, and I think about some of them, this being their first agility dog, a lot of them, their entire career in the sport has spanned a matter of months, right? To give them this opportunity at this point in their career where they can build from it.
Yes.
It's just such a better foundation for them than what I had, where I had to hit a wall before I realized I needed help, and that I needed to reevaluate myself as part of the team. So I like the opportunity to present to them something that they may not have found if I hadn't had that experience. It's something great that came out of it.
So what's a piece of advice that you've been given that you think has made the biggest impact on you?
We spoke a little bit about my mom saying life turns corners, and I do think that is one of the more impactful ones. But I have a really, really amazing coach who has become my best friend. And if she's listening to this at some point, I hope she knows that. And if she didn't before, she does now. And one thing that she is constantly reminding me of is that this is a game. And if we forget that, then we will lose the reason that we started. I think it's important to reflect on that every time that we step to the line. So I'd say that that's probably the piece of advice that has stuck with me in the sport, and that what my mom said is the piece of advice that has stuck with me in life.
How can people follow you? If someone wants to, I want to follow Elaine on social media, or I want to find her, I need an agility coach or a wedding photographer. How do they find you?
Well, I mean, I'd love more friends. We can always have more friends. Isn't that a wonderful part of this digital age that we're in? So yeah, anyone's welcome to follow me on Facebook. It's just my name, Elaine Welbourn. Send me a friend request, and then I can point you in the right direction, or just to say hi.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending time. What we're going to do now is we're going to have a couple more chats. We're going to talk to women, and we're also going to talk to dog handlers. So if you are not a member of my Patreon membership, please join. The links are in the comments. Thank you so much, Elaine, for all of your wisdom. I love the Life Turns Corners. I think that's going to become a new mantra of mine.
I hope that it does. I think my mom would really like that.
I'd love to honor her like that.